Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Corey Yoder of Coriander Quilts, and today I am sharing with you the $5 pattern for the month of August. Now you might notice it's a few days after the 1st, and I've been mulling over how I wanted to share this month's $5 pattern. And we're going to do things just a little bit differently for this round. The reason we are doing things a little bit differently is because I don't have my actual quilt to share for this month's pattern. I am offering Pumpkin Festival for my $5 pattern this month, and I had such a fun opportunity to give my quilts away a couple years ago, so I no longer have it to show. Typically during these $5 pattern chit-chat videos, I would be showing you the quilt behind me. We'd talk about the quilting, talk about the quilt a little bit, and then I would say you can go buy the $5 pattern in my Etsy shop. But we can't do it the same way this month. So what we're doing instead is I am going to give you a brief tutorial on how to piece this quilt. Now you will need the pattern Pumpkin Festival, which let me just hold it up so you know what we're talking about. Pumpkin Festival looks like this. Let's look at it down here on the table a little bit better too. Looks like this, and it is a fun fall themed pumpkin quilt. I do have a blog post where I've shared more photos of the actual quilt, so I will have that linked below so that you can see photos of the quilt, since I can't share it with you here on the video. But what I will do instead is we will talk a little bit about how to piece this quilt. I think it's one of those quilts that looks a little bit trickier to piece than it actually is, and once you see how easy it is to piece, it makes it really interesting. Now, this tutorial is a little bit different than some of the other ones I offer on my channel in that you will need the Pumpkin Festival pattern for all of the measurements. I'm not giving any measurements during this tutorial, just showing how you would piece the block. So you will need the pattern, but like I said, it is the $5 pattern this month, so it's a good deal over in my Etsy shop for this month of August. Now the requirements, which you can also get over in Etsy on the listing, they're listed there, but we'll talk about them a little bit here as well as go over some of the quilt information. The quilt will finish at 72 by 92, so it's a pretty roomy quilt. You would need a jelly roll. It's a jelly roll quilt, and then you're going to need some fabric for your pumpkins, 1 1/4 yards. You'll need an 1/8 yard for these little pumpkin stems, 5 yards of your background fabric, and then binding, backing, and batting. Now, for my tutorial today, I am going to be making my pieces using Peachy Keen, which I think is going to make such a cute little pumpkin and alternate block for this quilt. I think it would be adorable to do the whole quilt using Peachy Keen. And as I was cutting my fabric, this little print here is a peach print fabric, but it almost could be a pumpkin, depending on how you look at it. Now these fabrics hit quilt shops a little bit later this fall. Right now it's looking like an October release into quilt shops. So this could be a really fun project to work on using Peachy Keen in just a couple months. Of course, any fall themed fabric is going to be really cute for this quilt. I used my Cozy Up line of fabric when I made the quilt, and that was just adorable, but there are always so many pretty fall themed fabric lines that you could really do any number of things with this one. All right, so I have cut out my pieces, my A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. My background fabric is the white on white from Peachy Keen, but you could just as easily substitute a solid fabric. The white solid that matches my fabric lines is 9900-200. That's Bella Solid in the color Off-White. And the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to make little flip and stitch corners using our A and our D. So let's just move these over here, and you are going to place your D square just like so, with your diagonal running from top right to bottom left. You will have this marked on the back of each of your D squares, and then you're just going to sew on that marked line. You're going to press away from the center, so you're going to press it out, and then you're going to make sure everything is nice and tidy. If you've been around here for any length of time, you know that I like sewing pressing, and then trimming out the bottom 2 layers for my stitch and flip corners. That way you can make sure that everything is nice and tidy before you trim out those bottom 2 layers. So that is the first step that you're going to need to do. And since we are making multiple stitch and flip corners, I'll just go ahead and explain what you would do with your B's and your F's, because those are also stitch and flip corners. And of course, all of this information is listed in the pattern, including how I like to do these stitch and flips. But you are going to be adding these little squares all around the corners of your B rectangle. And you can see how I'm placing these here. And some of you might be familiar with these as stitch and flip corners. They're also sometimes called sew and flip, snowball corners, easy quarter triangles. You'll hear them called multiple different names. But basically it's just when we are adding a square to the top of a square or a rectangle, sewing on that diagonal, and then trimming out the bottom 2 layers. So here I'm going to sew again on the marked diagonal for all 4 corners. I will press that away from the center and then trim out those bottom 2 layers. I'm going to go ahead and get these 2 units complete so you can see how those are going to look, and then I will explain the next steps. There's really not that much more piecing after we do these stitch and flip corners. I think you'll be surprised. So let me get these sewn up. This is the start of our pumpkin block. And this is the start of our other block. We have just a couple steps we need to take yet. The first is to sew this unit here along with E. And the other step that we want to take is to sew together 2 G rectangles along with a C rectangle. And this is going to make our pumpkin stem. 2 cute little blocks are now complete. Let's take a look at what we've got here. So this is block 1. It just needed that rectangular piece sewn to the bottom of the stitch and flip unit. And then this is the stem unit, and I went ahead and sewed it right away to the pumpkin. Now, would you believe it if I told you those are the only 2 blocks that you need to make the entire Pumpkin Festival quilt? You need to make a lot of them, but they're not hard to make, and you just can go to town and have a good time. So just those 2 blocks will turn into your Pumpkin Festival quilt. I love when a quilt looks trickier than it actually is to piece, and I think this is one that definitely looks harder to piece than it is, because it's really just these 2 blocks, and then the way you rotate them and place them in the final quilt layout is what gives them this really fun appearance. So I hope that makes the Pumpkin Festival quilt feel doable. I hope you also enjoyed kind of this different change of pace for my $5 pattern. You'll have to let me know if you liked this tutorial format or if you much prefer seeing the whole quilt in video format like what I usually do. Now I will have linked below to the blog post where I have photos of my Pumpkin Festival quilt so that you can see how it looks completed. But it was just too good of an opportunity, such a fun thing to be able to give that quilt away for someone special, and so that was something I couldn't pass up. The pattern is over in my Etsy shop for $5. The Pumpkin Festival pattern. I've got that linked below, so if you wanted to grab a pattern for yourself, you'll have that information below. And let me know if you have any questions. I will be happy to answer those for you. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will catch you again next time.